Hey, I'm Hunt, and this is Hunt on LSU, your channel for LSU Fighting Tiger football talk. Enjoy the video. We want you to leave a comment below, hit that like button, and subscribe right below the video. Enjoy.
Wilson Alexander yesterday with NOLA.com, he put out a list of 5 players with potential breakout seasons for LSU. Quite a good list. However, I want to kind of break it down, give you my thoughts on who my 5 could maybe be. He starts the list off with Mason Smith. I think this is a pretty obvious one. I can't wait to see what him and Mekhi Wingo do in that interior of the defensive line. There's also a lot of depth at this position as well. I mean, you got a Jacoby and Guillory. I just mentioned Mekhi Wingo. You got some young guys coming in, but think about all the transfers coming in. Jordan Jefferson, Paris Shand, Jalen Lee, who's from right here in the state of Louisiana, coming over from the Florida Gators. That's a spot that I'm really looking forward to watching. So much talent and depth right there in the interior of your defense. I agree with this Mason Smith one. Look, he's a guy that came in huge 5-star, top 5 player nationally when he came in 2 years ago. Started to gain steam a little bit late in his freshman year, and then last year we all saw it. First drive of the game against Florida State. He tears that knee. He misses the entire year. Now people are kind of sleeping on him a little bit. I mean, I was a little surprised to see him on the first team All-SEC list. Not because I don't think he should be there, but because up until that point, we really haven't heard a lot about him, at least as far as the national media goes. I mean, we here in Baton Rouge, we know all about Mason Smith, the talent he is, and the potential around him. I couldn't agree more, though. I am certainly looking forward to see what he does here in 2023 in Baton Rouge. He moves on and stays with the defensive line, though, with Savion Jones. I talked about this yesterday as far as edge being one of my question marks for this LSU defense heading into 2023. He's going to be that hand in the dirt defensive end, opposite of that edge or that jack linebacker, if you want to call it. I think he's the lead here. I mean, I know we have Quincy Wiggins. He was a highly touted guy last year. Played a little bit as a freshman. Still really raw when he got to LSU, though. He's working his way in, and he could very well factor in here, but Savion Jones, he looked good last year. I was surprised to see this stat. Did you know he actually finished 3rd on the team last year with 4.5 sacks? I did not realize that because, again, he was kind of a role player. That really shows the impact he had when he stepped foot on the field. He definitely made the most of his opportunity. Again, I think he's the leader at this group, and this is a group that has a lot of depth as well. Kind of shifting towards the offensive side of the ball. As far as the receiver position go, Wilson Alexander wrote that Brian Thomas was going to kind of be his breakout guy on the offensive side of the ball. Big 6'4" wide receiver from Walker High School. Shout out my alma mater. Look, we've seen the big playability from Brian Thomas. They've thrown some jump balls up to him in the end zone. Had a really nice one halfway through the season last year. Jaden Daniels put it on the money right over defender. Thomas, he just out-jumped him. Look, from a guy that's from Walker, Louisiana, this guy, great basketball player. Walker won the state championship about 4 or 5 years ago. He was the MVP on that state championship basketball team. Athleticism off the charts, and he's also been pretty consistent. Now, you know, he hasn't gotten a ton of targets, but look what he did as a freshman. 28 receptions, 359 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Again, that's as a freshman. Last year, he didn't have a huge jump, but he was better across the board. 31 receptions, 361 yards, and then 5 touchdowns last season as a sophomore. We always see that big third-year jump from a lot of guys, you know, that junior year, their money year, if you want to call it. However, is he the right choice here? Look, I love Brian Thomas, fellow Walker, Louisiana guy like myself, but I'm not sure if he's my breakout wide receiver. I'm actually going to lean Kyron Lacey here. We saw Lacey get on the field a lot last year. He was another ULL transfer. I talked about Mekhi Garner a couple days ago. He comes in from ULL, really kind of burst onto the scene, makes an impact right away. His problem last year, he had quite a few drops. That was his issue. He didn't have the most sure hands in the world, but word out of spring practice was that, you know, he was working on that. He looked very sure-handed. One of the most athletic guys in that entire receiver room. If you remember the play that we all saw from that spring game, the ball was thrown right down the middle. I believe Garrett Nussmeier actually threw this pass, but I could be wrong. It could have been Jaden Daniels. But anyways, he throws it across the middle. He jumps up, snags it out of the air with one hand right on the eye of the Tiger, and then outran everybody. It wound up being like a 65, 75-yard touchdown in that spring game. To me, the athleticism here is off the charts. He's also got the size. He's about 6'3", 215 range. Thomas is big as well. I mentioned he was 6'4", but he doesn't quite have the body. And look, they have a lot of first-year players coming into this position as well. Shelton Sampson from right here at Catholic High in Baton Rouge. Matt Moscona would be screaming Catholic High right now. I'm not going to do that to you, though. We also got Jaylen Brown, who, if he wouldn't have got hurt in the spring and had to sit out a lot of spring practice, I think we'd be talking about him a lot more. He's one of my favorite players from this entire recruiting class. Might be the fastest guy in that receiver room. That's saying a lot. You got Aaron Anderson and Chris Hilton in that room. I'll get to them in a minute, but Jaylen Brown coming in as a true freshman. I think he's going to play a lot. I think that's kind of my surprise freshman on the offensive side of the ball, regardless of position. Now, I just mentioned Aaron Anderson coming in from Alabama. Didn't play a ton at Alabama, but as soon as he came in, what did we hear from Brian Kelly in the spring? Hey, there's going to be a role for Aaron Anderson on this team. He's going to have a role. He's going to make an impact. We really believe that, punt returner, kickoff returner, that's probably Aaron Anderson's spot to lose. He's got that speed, that athleticism, but he could make some noise in that receiver room as well. We talk about the big three all the time. We know about Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas, Kyron Lacey, who we just talked about, but who's going to kind of step up after those three veteran guys? I don't see why it couldn't be a Jaylen Brown or an Aaron Anderson, but I love that room. The last two guys he mentioned, he went back to the defensive side of the ball, and especially D-line. When I look at this list, it's hard to argue with any of these guys, but it really shows you how deep this LSU defensive line really is. I mean, we got Mason Smith, Mekhi Wingo, 2 first-team All-SEC preseason selections. He went Jacoby and Guillory. And I really like this pick. He's a guy that kind of gets lost in the shuffle every now and then, a big run stuffer, a space filler, if you will. I mean, 6'3", 6'4", 330 plus. Came in the same recruiting class as a Jaquelin Roy. Now, Roy's gone on to bigger and better things. He certainly had a good career, but Guillory, no slouch either. I mean, he's going to get in there. He's going to be that run stuffer, like I mentioned. Been on the team for a while. Could make a significant impact on the inside of that defensive line. He also gives you a little bit different look than a Smith and a Wingo. I don't think Smith or Wingo is going to line up at that nose. But, I mean, if you need to go 4-man down in the ground with their hand in the dirt, you could put in a guy like a Jacoby and Guillory to be that nose tackle. Also, what will the D-line rotation look like? We've talked about Smith. We've talked about Wingo, Savion Jones. I just mentioned all the transfers. Parashand, Jordan Jefferson, not the quarterback, the transfer D-lineman from West Virginia. You got Jalen Lee coming in from Florida. This is probably the deepest position on your team, and I don't really think it's close. And that says a lot about what Brian Kelly's valuing. I thought LSU was lacking a little bit. Not necessarily their starters. Wingo and Roy did a great job, but there was not a ton of depth. We talked about Mekhi Wingo, discussed it at SEC Media Days. He played almost every snap on the defensive side of the ball last year because you didn't have a ton of depth on that defensive line behind him. You got Guillory, you got other guys, all the transfers I just mentioned. You got some freshmen coming in as well. I'm really, really excited about this defensive line. And the last guy he mentions is Sage Ryan. This is Sage Ryan's third year on the team. He was highly recruited coming out of high school. Another guy, a 5-star. I'm sure most LSU fans hope this is the case. I'm losing my patience with him a little bit. His issue is not that, he's been buried on the depth chart. He's had a lot of injuries. He's just been very inconsistent, and I'd go as far as to say a liability at times. Again, he came in with a lot of height, but for whatever reason, he has not put it together. He was in that nickel spot last year, but you kind of changed that up a little bit. You saw Greg Brooks play nickel. Jay Ward kind of finished off the season at that nickel spot. That's a spot that's up for grabs. I mean, again, he played it a lot last year, but didn't really play it all that well. Will he get a start at nickel? He also came into LSU as a safety. They need safety help as well. However, I think Greg Brooks and Major Burns pretty much have a lock on those two starting spots. I think nickel's probably the best spot for him to get on the field. But again, a lot of talent coming in. We talked about all the cornerbacks yesterday. Zy Alexander, Denver Harris, Deuce Chestnut, a guy that could lock it down on the outside on the perimeter as that shutdown corner, or he can kick down, play inside at that nickel spot. Look, I sure hope Sage Ryan breaks out, but I don't think that's any guarantee. There is a lot of depth right now at that nickel spot. There's a lot of bodies only competing for one starting spot. We'll see what he can do. I know he was highly rated out of high school, but right now I am not very high on Sage Ryan and his potential in 2023. Other than that, though, I love the list. Mason Smith, Jacoby and Guillory, Brian Thomas Jr., who I could see that happening. However, that receiver room is so deep, probably the deepest on the offensive side of the ball. It could really be anybody. My vote, I'm throwing my hat in the ring for a Kyron Lacey. And, of course, Savion Jones, the last one on his list of 5 players.
Hey, thanks for watching Hunt on LSU. Before you get out of here, do us a couple of favors. Hit that like button, leave your comments below, and subscribe to the channel for all your Fighting Tiger football talk. See you next time.